Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Planning Committee this evening. I'm Councillor Paul Harvey and I'm the Vice Chair of the committee in the chair this evening. Just to begin with some housekeeping, if that's okay. The fire evacuation procedures for this evening's meeting. There are no scheduled fire alarms, but if you hear the fire alarm this evening, can we please evacuate the building through the doors at the back of the room, down the fire exit that's behind you, go out of the main doors there, and please meet and congregate in the War Memorial Park. The meeting is being webcast, so for both councillors and members of the public, you are being recorded and live streamed this evening on YouTube. And can I please ask all of you in the room to turn off your mobile telephones or please move them to silent so that we can't hear them. For the benefit of the members of the public watching and for the meeting, just to clarify, I am the Vice Chair of the meeting this evening. Councillor Robinson is away, so I'll be chairing the meeting. To my right are councillors who will be making the decision on the meeting's agenda items this evening, and to my left are officers who will be presenting the applications and giving us advice. The DC Committee is a regulatory committee and it is not a political meeting. The committee will be considering the published papers before us this evening, examining the evidence brought before us tonight, and we will make the decisions this evening based on planning reasons. We are guided by both the national and local planning policy guidance. At the appropriate time, I'll ask speakers to come forward to contribute to the meeting in the order that's been set out on the update paper that's been published. And I'll ask all speakers, please, including visitors from the public, to speak clearly and to keep points made to material reasons only. There'll be no further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers permitted once the questioning is finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time, and I'll advise you when you've got a minute left of the time that you've been allotted. Can I ask all the committee members to avoid any repetition and to avoid and to basically keep comments to within 4 minutes when you're making them, please, on each item. There are 5 items on the agenda this evening, so I genuinely do anticipate we can do it in the 3 hours we usually set ourselves. I'd be surprised if we can't tonight. I understand that planning can be emotive, but I do ask that everybody remain polite and professional throughout the meeting. We have 5 items, as I say, on the agenda this evening because item 4 has been removed and withdrawn from the agenda. So the items 1, 2 and 3 and 5 and 6 of the published agenda are those we'll be considering. And just for clarity, item 1 is listed as being in Whitchurch and Overton when it came to committee, when it came through the process. Of course, we've had boundary changes since then, so it is now in Evingar ward, as councillors have rightly pointed out this evening, and that's clarified on the update paper. In terms of apologies for absence this evening, I have Councillor Robinson and Councillor Court as apologies. I have no substitutions for those members unless anybody knows anybody else is arriving during the meeting, but they're not here. Thank you. Do I have any declarations of interest on any item on the agenda this evening? No. There are no urgent matters. The minutes of the meeting that was held on the 7th of September will be presented to the meeting on the 12th of October. There are no minutes for us to approve this evening. So we can go to the applications that are actually on the agenda, starting with item 1, which is Cressington, Stoke Lane, Hurstbourne Priors in Evingar. And can I ask the officers to introduce the application, please?
The proposal at Cressington is for 4 dwellings, landscaping and associated parking. The members should note that the wrong elevation and internal layout plans for plot 3 are incorrect within the agenda, but for tonight's discussion, the correct plot 3 elevations and internal layout will be shown on the visualizer, which shows a 2-bedroom dwelling and not a 3-bedroom dwelling, which is what the error was. There's nothing to report on the update, and the recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions within the agenda.
Thank you, Nicola. There are no speakers to this item. Can I ask members if you have any questions of officers on this item, please? None? Do we have any debate on the item, please? Who'd like to kick us off? There are none? In which case I will move the recommendation, which is on the agenda for approval as per the officers. Do I have a seconder to that? Councillor Frost? All those in favour, please, of recommendation? That's unanimous. Thank you. First one down. Item 2 is the Gambrish House cottage in St Marybourne, Evingar, We have two speakers this evening. Could I ask Mr. Pettit to please come forward to the speaker stand? You know which one it is, don't you? Thank you. And could I ask the officers to introduce the application, please?
This is a full planning application with a description of development for demolition of the existing dwelling and outbuilding and erection of a replacement dwelling. There's a small update on the update papers just confirming that the members visited the site and viewed the relationship with the adjacent listed building and its setting in the conservation area. Noted that the outbuilding was already demolished, and just to confirm that the pre-commencement condition, which is 14 on page 97 of the main papers relating to dust suppression, has been agreed by the applicant's agent.
Thank you, Patricia. Mr. Pettit, you have 4 minutes if you'd like to address the committee.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Mark Pettit. I work for Fowlers. We prepared and submitted this application on behalf of the applicant, Deborah Richards. The application is recommended for approval and we fully support this recommendation. I'll try not to talk for too long, as the officer's report is comprehensive and robust, and it sets out clearly why planning permission should be granted in this instance, in line with the local plan and the National Planning Policy Framework, as well as the neighbourhood plan. Permission is sought by our client to remove Gangbridge House Cottage and replace it with a modest 4-bedroom property. The existing house is not listed, locally listed or curtilage listed, and it's not considered to make a particularly positive contribution to the character and appearance of the conservation area. Its removal is therefore considered acceptable from a planning and conservation point of view, and no objection has been raised by the Council's Historic Environment team. Historic England have been consulted, but they have not offered any advice. Members will note from the committee report that a similar application was withdrawn on the site back in May 2021. This previous scheme was much larger and grander in appearance than what is now being presented under this current application. Indeed, we've amended the scheme a number of times to overcome conservation concerns and worked with officers to find an appropriate solution for the site. This has included noticeably reducing the size and scale of the proposed dwelling, altering its form and changing its overall appearance so that it is cottage-like in its character. We now have a replacement dwelling that will sit comfortably in this location. Whilst larger than the existing dwelling, the increase in proportions is considered modest, and the new cottage will still appear subservient to Gangbridge House. Indeed, the proposed dwelling is only 20 centimetres higher than the existing cottage, 1.4 metres wider, although the 2-storey element is roughly the same, and 5.3 metres deeper. The overall footprint is not noticeably greater than the existing, and the site is a substantial plot, which is more than capable of accommodating a dwelling of this size. In terms of its positioning, the new house has been sited further to the northwest than the existing cottage. This provides greater separation with the Grade 2 listed Gangbridge House, which is considered to be beneficial from a conservation point of view. The use of brick and plain clay tiles, as proposed, is not unusual along Gangbridge Lane and the wider conservation area. The proposed dwelling will therefore respond successfully to the fabric of the local area and this part of the AONB. There are no technical reasons why this application should not proceed, and no objection has been raised by biodiversity or environmental health. From a flood risk point of view, the proposed dwelling is sited wholly within flood zone 1, and in terms of trees, only 2 Category C laurels will need to be removed as part of this application. The applicant is happy to accept all the suggested conditions set out in the committee report, including those relating to materials, landscaping, electric vehicle charging provision, window and door details, and the removal of permitted development rights. In summary, the proposed development is considered to accord with the relevant policies within the development plan and the National Planning Policy Framework, in particular Local Plan Policy SS6D, which requires the replacement dwellings to be of a size that is appropriate to the plot and not significantly visually intrusive in the landscape. The proposed dwelling meets both of these requirements and will make a positive contribution to the character and appearance of the area and the wider AONB. We therefore respectfully request that planning permission be granted accordingly, in line with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions to the speaker, please, from members? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for coming on tonight and speaking. I just have one question. You were very descriptive about the fact that the building is 1.4 metres wider, than the existing, and 20 centimetres higher. 20 centimetres higher. But you then suddenly went very vague on the size of the second story. Okay, could you please just enlighten me?
So are you asking me to give you floor space figures?
No, what I'm asking, if I may clarify, Chair, is to have the dimensions of how much bigger or how much smaller the second story is than the existing.
The proposed house is 20 centimetres higher than the existing house. That's the key dimension in terms of height. I'm not sure what other dimension you were asking me to provide.
Does that satisfy you, Councillor Frost? Or
Yeah, as much as I'm going to be able to. Okay, thank you.
understood. Any other questions from any other members? Thank you very much. Councillor Carr, would you like to come forward? Thank you, Councillor Carr. You have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. As ward member for Evacuation, I'm speaking to you this evening on behalf of the parish council and of residents of St Marybourne, particularly those on Gangbridge Lane. As you'll have seen, there are significant objections from residents in that area. I want to make clear tonight that residents of St Marybourne do not feel that this application has developed sufficiently to be acceptable at this time. Residents accept that the cottage will be redeveloped, but they're clear that the current proposal is too large and too inappropriate for its context. Our case is that this scheme conflicts with our policy EM11 on heritage, breaches protections afforded by the St Marybourne Conservation Area, and would detrimentally impact the protected landscapes of our AONB. Our Conservation Officer's change of heart on this is unsound and unreliable. When he first reviewed the first and second iterations of these plans, he accurately noted that the delivery of a larger property in this area would cause harm to the setting and context of the Grade 2 listed Gangbridge House. And he further recognised that the conservation area in this area is premised on a settlement hierarchy of gently rising built form ending in Gangbridge House. And I'm afraid that there have been few meaningful changes to that fundamental point. The frontage of the home remains tall and wide and a challenge, therefore, to Gangbridge House. And so my ask of this committee is that they stick with the original view of the Conservation Officer and indicate that a grand executive home in this space would conflict with our heritage and conservation policies. And then my final point is that this scheme conflicts with our duty in our local plan to protect historic and naturally protected landscapes. The site is a prominent area. It is visible from across the Bourne Valley, and thus any development here is particularly sensitive. Whereas the current cottage is hardly visible, the proposed home would disrupt the long views across a valley that is nationally recognised and protected as an AONB landscape. I would thus argue that the scheme is also in conflict with our policy EM1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Do I have any questions for the councillor? None? Thank you, councillor. Members, do you have any questions for officers? Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart.
Just quickly, the proportion of the site being taken by the building, can you give us that, Nicola?
It's me that's doing it. If you look on page 100 of your printed papers, there's you can see in quite dark print the layout of the existing house, the proposed house with the roof plan. And to the front of that, you can see the outline of the building that actually has been demolished when we went on site. That's the outbuilding. And then between the south would be elevation there, there's the dotted outline of the existing building that's to be demolished. So there is an overlap. So you can follow that through and you can see the building that's being demolished. I don't have the percentage of what is or isn't being built on, but it's within the location of the existing built form part of the garden plot. It's on there. So it's on page 100. You can see so it overlaps the. Thank you.
Point to it. Point to it.
Can you point to it, Aggie, with your last plotter?
Oh, I'm not sure how to
No.
do that one.
So yeah, so it's the existing building at the front that was projecting forward. That was a single-storey outbuilding. That's gone now. Then the existing house, you can just see the blue dotted line coming under the canopy of that tree, the boundary with Gangbridge House. So the property overlaps the existing, and if you just go along the ridge line, you can see the end of the house is sort of at the spine of the back extension, if you call it that. So that's the end of the house.
Councillor Rattigan.
And there are some dimensions on page 75. The proposed dwelling would have a depth of 12.6 metres, but that includes what we sort of call the two-storey extension at the back. That's what it looks like.
Thank you for that explanation. I was just wondering, it's been alluded to that this development is proportionally too big for the plot. And I was wondering if the built form was 16% of the plot or 20% of the plot. If you don't have those figures, that's not the problem. I just want to try and understand the proportionality of the built form in a plot that size.
Thank you, Ken. Any other questions? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. We're sort of in the same vein. Looking at our papers, and I did see a picture up there showing the existing elevation next to the proposed elevation. I think I saw one. So that's the existing one there. Now, I don't think they are to the same scale. Am I right? Am I wrong? Because if they're not to the same scale, I'm sorry, but that's not very useful to this committee. And I notice in the report, we've got some scales, whether this is the applicant and whether this is something we as a council should be clarifying, is getting things so we can all actually compare sort of apples with apples. Because, I mean, that is a massive house. The windows are huge, much bigger in scale. The front door's bigger. So, I don't know, unless I'm dreaming, but to me, that's a massive house, but not according with those dimensions that we've got in the report.
The plans that you have aren't to scale because they are just snips of the to scale plans that we just put on for information. If you give me just a moment, I've got a package here, so I can literally just measure the height of the existing building and the proposed building, because I don't think it's compared in the report, so just bear with me.
Would that be helpful, Councillor Tomlin, if we...
Well, it would, but one laid on top of the other at the correct scale would be even better. But you probably haven't got time to do that.
Give us a minute. We're saying it's 0.2 metres higher, is the answer from the officers. 0.2 metres. Can we clarify that? Mike, we don't clarify that?
you would need people who are vertically challenged to get through the door, because they obviously are not to the same scale. And in fact, rather than being helpful, it's actually unhelpful.
So, councillors, just to confirm, the having taken off the scale plans just now, so the ridge height of the existing is 7.2 at its highest point.
Well, it can depend. The floor, the ground moves away, so it goes between sort of 7 and 7.2.
So between
yeah.
7 and 7.2, the proposed dwelling is 7.4 metres. So I think when the agent referenced 0.2 metres, it's taken that distance of the greatest, the smallest amount, if you like, because of the ground level changing. I think the key issue here, then, members, is obviously you're not just looking at the height of a building. I know height is very important. You are assessing what you see in terms of what you see on site in terms of the viewing, plus you can look at the photographs of the site as well. So again, if you look at the property as is, that's the existing, that is the one that is between 7 and 7.2 metres, depending on which part of the ground level it's measured from, because there's a slight slope, as I understand. The proposed dwelling is 7.4 metres, so 0.2 metres higher.
Councillor Tomlin, did you want to come back of any kind, or are you satisfied?
Thank you, Chair. Well, yes, I hear that and I can read that, but I'm sorry, I still maintain these drawings are unhelpful because they are at different scales. We're supposed to be looking at the sort of impact. We can visualise numbers in our head, but we've got, you know, a much reduced existing site elevations. We've got proposed elevations, which I'm sure are at a bigger scale, but there's also a proposed elevation that's smaller than the other three elevations on pages 104 and 105. So my point is, I think we can work this out for ourselves, but going forward, please, can we have them to the same scale? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. What I will say is we'll take that away. The officers are aware of what's been said this evening, and it will be picked up offline. Are there any other questions that you would like to ask? Councillor Howard-Sorrell.
From what I could tell, the recommended conditions given by the conservation officer or the haven't been included. Is that right, or have I just missed them? He specifically said that permitted development rights for extensions, new garden buildings and boundary treatments.
Going through the list on page 87. Going through the list on page 87 that the Conservation Officer, details of proposed materials, windows and doors is condition 16 on page 97. Landscape and boundary treatments are condition 4 is landscaping and boundary treatments was arboricultural material was condition 15 on 97, and the permitted development rights is the sort of quite technical one on page 98, it's condition 17, which removes A and AA, which is extensions, B is loft conversions, C is alterations to the roof to insert windows, D is porches, and E are outbuildings. So that's removed from there. In addition, it is in a conservation area, so it has less permitted development rights as well.
Councillor Howard-Sorrell, is that? Any other questions from anybody else? Okay. Debate. Silence. Nobody wishes to contribute? Councillor Rattigan.
I wonder, could I see the picture of Gangbridge House again? That one, yeah. I mean, I know and I sense it is a notable building, but that rear extension with that window there looks very modern to me, and is an incongruous piece of additional development on a Grade 2 house. I have to think it's already been spoiled by that addition, and I wonder if anything in the garden next door could actually make that any more ugly than it currently is. So I'm happy to move the approval as laid out by officers.
Thank you, Councillor Hussey, you're seconding. Any other contribution to debate? I have a motion for approval on the table as per the officer's recommendation, moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. Nine. So 9 in favour, 2 abstention. That's carried. Can you confirm the decision, please, Patricia?
I can confirm that the planning permission has been granted subject to the conditions on the approved papers, main papers.
Main papers. Thank you very much. The next application, item 3, is for Hollybush, Frog Lane, Little London. Patricia, can you introduce the paper, please?
Okay, this is a full planning permission again for the erection of a new dwelling in the side garden. There is an update to confirm that members visited the site, viewed the existing buildings, the character of the area, and it was pointed out that there was an extant approval on the site across the road, and some more information was asked about that. So if you go to the approved scheme, so the planning application that's extant across the road, if you see the red outline, that's the outline of the approved dwelling, and then to the north of that, on the other side of the road, that is the property, the dwelling that exists on this house, which is on page 33 of the main paper. So you can see the L shape of Hollybush. So that's to state that that was just for information that that's extant and can be built. On site, members asked what part of SS6 that had been allowed under, and having looked at the officer's report, it didn't comply with SS6E, but the tilted balance and the planning history of the site, taking note that there'd been applications refused and dismissed at appeal, the officers considered that this was a scheme that was acceptable, and the tilted balance, the harm of the previous schemes, had been addressed. That was allowed on a 20 application, and then this was modified in 21, and so this is extant. It was approved this year. So that was the history of the site across the road. There's then additional information that was asked for, which is confirmation of where the plot split is. The applicants have sent us through a plan showing where the split between the two properties, the existing and proposed, is. The caravan that was on the site is shown there. The applicant's agent has confirmed that the applicants had been living in it whilst they were renovating Hollybush, and they intend to remove it once they occupy, this house is occupied. So there's a condition been added to require that's removal following the first occupation of this dwelling. There was also, we sought clarification because the plans show an upstairs kitchen as well as a downstairs kitchen, but they've confirmed that that's because there's the wrap-around first floor balcony that looks over the countryside. They've confirmed that's just a small kitchen so they can prepare food without having to go downstairs to enjoy the elevated open space. So it is one dwelling, but with a smaller upstairs kitchen as well as a downstairs kitchen. Then there's some tidying up of the caravans because of the reduction in the site area to that there, not including Hollybush Garden. The condition 14 has been removed, and then there was a mistypo on condition 15, which is now condition 14, but there's no huge change. It was just correcting typos and renumbering.
Thank you, Patricia. There are no public speakers to this. Any questions to officers from members? No? To Councillor?
Yeah, just a short note. I don't think we can do much, but there was, when we visited, there was some, I think there were leylandii bushes, that, as ugly as leylandii is, but in the middle there was a rather stupendous hawthorn bush. Is there any way we can recommend that that be kept? I think it fell with outside the parameter of the new building, but as I say, can we request that it be kept, because it was rather lovely.
You can see it there because it's a different season, so you can see the leylandii in full bloom, but the hawthorn is the more sort of lungy type structure there. It is integrated. I did go into the tree structure to see whether it was, but it's a multi-stemmed bush. So, it's not in a conservation area; it's in a garden, so it wouldn't qualify for protection through those. So it could be removed. We could add an informative to our sort of best endeavours if it could be retained. But there's no issue on removing the Lelandii. It's yeah. Okay, we can add an informative just for best endeavours and for the yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? Debate? No debate? The application is recommended for approval, and I'm happy to add the informative that Councillor Bowles has just identified if members are happy. So I'll move it from the chair as a recommendation for approval. Seconded, Councillor Frost. All those in favour? It's 11-0. Can we just confirm the decision? Thank you.
I can confirm that the application has been approved, subject to the conditions on the main papers as amended, as well on the update, with an informative to best endeavours to retain. It was a hawthorn, wasn't it? Yeah, the hawthorn in the rear garden.
It most definitely was.
Yeah.
It most definitely was. Brilliant. It was pretty glorious, to say the least. And it was full of fruit as well. It was full of everything, wasn't it? Members, I'm just going to say now that we'll have a short 5-minute break between the next two items. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, are we good to go again? Thank you. Okay, everybody, we shall move on to item 5, which is Liam, Pantings Lane, Highclere, Evingar. And Nicola, can you introduce the application, please? And can I ask Mr. Reynolds to come forward to the speaker stand? Position number 1, please.
This application concerns erection of first floor extensions, internal alterations, associated works, Liam's Pantings Lane. Obviously, members viewed the site. Members should note on the update that there's a change to the recommendation which involves the expiry of a neighbour notification period. It doesn't change the recommendation for approval, but it's just we have to wait for the expiry of that neighbour notification period, and then so the recommendation is subject to no new adverse comments that have not been previously considered, that the application be approved subject to conditions. Also within the update, members' attention is drawn to the fact that the details and samples of the materials involved in the construction of the extension, etc., have been submitted, which are now considered to be acceptable by the planning authority, and as such, condition 3 within the agenda has now been changed to reflect that approval, the approval of those material condition, and that's it in terms of the recommendation is for approval subject to the expiry of the neighbour notification period.
Thank you, Nicola. Mr Reynolds, you've got 4 minutes to address the committee. The microphones and silver buttons in front of you, and I'll give you a notice when there's a minute left. Thank you.
Good evening. We greatly appreciate this opportunity to speak, and thank you for your consideration of our planning application. My name is David Reynolds, and together with my wife Jenny and our 2 children, we've lived at Learmont Pantings Lane for the past 18 months. Prior to this, we lived in Penwood, also within Highclere Parish, for 8.5 years. Our children of school age and both attended the local Infinite Junior schools. I coached the under-10s Walton Hill football team, and through these and other activities, we've made many good friends in the local area and have grown to feel very much part of the community. It's a fabulous place to live, and we feel very lucky to call it our home. The property we've moved into is in an excellent location, but unfortunately has not been well maintained for a number of years. It is in need of significant renovation to match the high standard of the other properties on Pantings Lane, and we have both the means and passion to take on this project. The property needs improvement structurally to the decor and to increase the energy efficiency of the building. Together, these improvements will extend the life of the property and will add positively to the character of the lane, benefiting the neighbouring dwellings and the wider village. We bought Leham with a clear plan to convert the roof space into upstairs floors and to reconfigure the ground floor to accommodate our family's needs as they get older. We had noted numerous bungalow conversions in both Highclere and Walton Hill and saw it as reasonable that we might do similar with Leham. We've engaged with a fully accredited and well-regarded local architect to ensure a design that has high aesthetic quality using appropriate materials for the area. Our initial application was for a more contemporary design, and although we felt it was a reasonable progression to the range of styles in Pantings Lane and within the wider village, we respectfully acknowledge and accept that this view was not shared by the planning team, parish council or neighbours. For our follow-up application, we engaged positively with these parties on multiple occasions to find a solution that will both afford our family the space we require whilst addressing their various concerns. These discussions ultimately resulted in the significantly amended design we're discussing this evening. We're delighted that the planning team are happy to support this application and thank them for their excellent support during the process. We've changed the design from a flat roof to a traditional dormer chalet bungalow to address concerns over the contemporary style. We've amended the materials to be more consistent with other dwellings within Pantings Lane and across Highclere. We've reduced the ridge height to just 60 centimetres above the existing roof and taken with a substantial distance between our property and that of the immediate neighbour, between 15 and 18 metres, feel that this has addressed concerns over blocking of light to their property. We also flipped the design around so the upstairs is now to the west end of the bungalow, a specific request in one of the objections to further reduce blocking of light and the feeling of bulk and dominance to the immediate neighbour. We've designated the rooms on the northern elevation of the first floor as a hallway or bathrooms with obscure glass to ensure that the privacy of our neighbours will not be impacted. We feel that as a result of all these changes, we are now proposing a very modest and reasonable design that not only satisfies relevant planning policy as noted in the planning officer's report, but addresses the concerns raised in the various objections.
You have a minute left.
Thank you. We've engaged with local building firms and assured that access for equipment during the build would not impact on the shared driveway and that trees and power lines can be safely avoided. We'll also ensure that badly maintained drainage in the drive is strengthened and repaired as part of the proposal. Finally, we've contracted a local tree surgeon to remove a number of unmaintained sycamore and ash that overhang the property, the removal of which will significantly increase the light to surrounding properties as well. In summary, I hope you can see we're committed to ensuring our development will have minimum impact on our neighbours whilst offering significant improvement to the property and the lane and allow our family to thrive and contribute to the parish for many years to come. I'd welcome your support of this application and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr Reynolds. Are there any questions from members to Mr Reynolds? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for coming in to speak. I was very pleased to see that you've got obscured glazing, okay, towards your neighbours for the ensuite and also for the bathroom. But I noticed that on the plans, you're not planning for obscure glazing on the actual landing. Okay, would it be a problem for the middle?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, there wouldn't be a problem at all. Actually, I thought there was there. Maybe that's just a slight mistake.
Okay, so So, sorry, Chair, just one very quick. So would you undertake to actually make sure that all those 3 dormers do actually have
Of course,
obscured?
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
wouldn't be a problem.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, Councillor Howard-Sorrell?
Thank you, Chair. I've just had another look through the objections from the parish council, and they've specifically mentioned the tile that you've selected for the roof, blue slate versus they preferred clay.
Yeah.
In the update paper, there's something called Edilion's Phalempin plain tile. Forgive me for not knowing what that is. Have you taken their considerations into account?
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely what you'd recognise as a clay colour tile, and they were shown to the guys again. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions from members to the speaker? No? Thank you very much. You can. Thank you. Brilliant. Questions to officers? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I think you know where I'm going. I'd just like to clarify whether in the plans we do actually have obscured glazing in that centre dormer.
Yes, it's correct. Although the plans do show just the ensuite and bathroom obscured glaze, but within the report and condition 4 on page 178, it does state that all windows on that northern elevation be obscure glazed.
Any other questions to officers? None? Debate? No. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that really my only concern regarding this application was one, flat roof, okay, which obviously is now being turned into a shallow peak, okay, and also the obscured glazing. So, you know, I'm satisfied there that I can support officer recommendations. Sorry, I got my wife's teeth in at the moment. Okay, and I'm happy to make the motion to approve.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Freeman. Do I have anybody who would like to speak further? Councillor Freeman.
Just say it's encouraging to see that the progression has gone through and that all the considerations from various objectives have been taken into account, and I don't see a problem with seconding the motion for approval.
Very much so. Any further speakers? I have a motion moved for approval, seconded on the floor. All those in favour, please. Against? None. Abstention? 1. That application is approved. Nicola, could you confirm that for us, please?
The application is approved subject to the expiry of the neighbour notification period.
Thank you very much. Item 6 on the agenda. The Oasis 16A Silchester Road, Tadley. Nicola, again, can you introduce the application? And could I please ask either Mr. or Mrs. or both Galvin to come down to the front speaker spot? Mr. Galvin, thank you.
This concerns the variation of a condition attached to a previous application, which basically changes the drawing numbers to show additional windows in the northern elevation of the dwelling that's currently been approved, and as you saw on site, is currently being constructed. There is members should note that within the agenda there's a wrong first floor plan shown. I think there's 2 ground floor plans, I think, but the internal layout for the first floor is incorrectly showing again. So the correct one has been provided and can be seen on the visualizer in a minute. There's the ground floor, so that's the correct plan, and we showed 2 of them. And that's the correct first floor plan and not the one in the agenda. So it shows obviously where the additional windows at first floor would be within bedroom 2 and bedroom 4, and like the landing bit in the middle, which is the central projection bit of that floor plan. There's nothing else to report within the update, and the recommendation is for approval subject to conditions.
Thank you, Nicola. Mr. Galvin, you have 4 minutes to address the committee. I'll remind you when you've got a minute left, and the speaker is in front of you. If you can. It's the silver button in front of you, one on the left or the right. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you very much. My reason for coming and speaking today, after reviewing all the plans relating to the Clurlow's property and this development, is the confusion within all the notes and the fact that this property faces Margaret Weston's old house that the Clulows own, and within the complexity, that property should have been demolished, but an oversight by the planning department didn't put a reference into it. And if you go through all the notes, it ends up with the Clulows clearly being still the landowners, not the people that are putting the planning application forward. So from our point of view as local residents, we've had issues with the Clulows, not with the people that live in this house, but the Clulows themselves in court cases having to go through, Stacey's having to put fences back up. We had to take the Clulows to court because the deviations they have in planning and the way they get round things, they've still got an outstanding issue with Basingstoke Council because they've increased the water level and people have to walk out in the road. So really it's the complexity of this and trying to understand what is 16, what is 16A and what is 16B. Mrs. Weston always lived at 16, which is still there, the Oasis. This new property is 16A, and there's clearly a 16B, which looks like George's old bike shed being converted into partial residential. Now, the oversight by, and I had to say it, Mike Townsend's department has led to this house still standing up, i.e. 16, when it should have been demolished. So there's a level of incompetency that's brought us to this position. So, yep.
Thank you. We turn your microphone off, please. Thank you. Any questions from members to the speaker? None. Thank you very much. Mr. Brinkies, who I don't see. You are clearly not Mr. Brinkies.
Hello councillors and hello officers, I am Kate Bull, I am the partner of Michael Brinkies.
Okay, can you just hold on for one moment, please?
Yep.
You are not the name that we have on the list. You've clearly indicated you are speaking on behalf of Mr. Brinkies, so I will allow it.
Okay.
You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you've got a minute left to go.
Okay.
And you've got the microphone on already, so
Thank you. As I said, I'm Kate Bull and I'm the partner of Michael Brinkies and we own the Oasis 16A, Silchester Road. The property is currently under construction. It will be my family home for myself, for my family and my parents. Now the internal walls have been constructed, we are nearing the completion of the roof. We have noticed the rooms in the north of the property are quite dark during the daytime. The current centre design of the exterior of the property is a large expanse of Staffordshire blue bricks. The installation of 4 small windows and 1 larger window will not only make the exterior of the front of the property more aesthetically pleasing, it would allow considerably more daylight in. We are aiming for the house to be extremely energy efficient. Allowing more daylight into the house as much as possible will lessen the use of electric light. I do believe photos have been taken from the proposed windows by the planning officer to show that the neighbours on Silchester Road are not overlooked and will be kept, their privacy will be kept. And that's it.
Okay, will you turn your microphone off for a second, please? Thank you. Questions from members to the speaker? None. Thank you very much. Councillor Slimming, would you like to come forward? Thank you, Joe. You've got 4 minutes, and I'll remind you when you've got a minute left. Thank you. Joe, you might go.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Good evening, councillors. I asked for this to come to viewing because, as you can see from the comments that were made by Mr. Galvin, this has been a site of considerable contention over a number of years, and I've been approached by the residents in the surrounding area. And I felt that because I couldn't actually physically see the site because it is obscured from view, that it would be better if it came for viewing and therefore you to make the decision as to whether this is okay to approve. As you saw on the site, there is now a considerable number of properties potentially on there, some of which are due for appeal, and one which is currently being built, and the original building which still remains. Unfortunately, that was maybe an oversight, but it is there, and we have to deal with it as it is, because obviously planning has moved on. There are now 2 properties on this site, both of which are invisible from view from the road. On your site visit, you would have seen that the original bungalow is still there, and there doesn't seem to be any dividing boundary between that and the new property. We did ask the resident who is building the property if he was going to deal with the boundary issues, because otherwise that is going to be very overlooked by these new windows. Okay, if it's the same site owner, but one assumes that Mr. Brinkies is going to move into this house and therefore there'll be 2 separate properties. I think it was asked that something would be looked at as to whether or not the boundary is going to be produced, and whether there is anything sympathetically going to be done. Otherwise, the new house will considerably overlook the old one. There was considerable confusion at the onset because of the 2 different properties. The numbers seem to change about the application, and that has caused an awful lot of confusion as well. So, at the moment, the boundary is of the whole site. This is what was called backland development, for those of you old enough to remember when such things happened. And therefore, the boundary around the whole site, as it was originally, is actually owned by the residents and not by the owners of the site. And there have been some contentious issues because of that. You picked up the point about the site plan being the same, and I would like confirmation that indeed with the landing, as it is, because we couldn't actually go in the building, whether the view from the landing with the larger window now is still going to be overlooked to the bungalows, which are number 18, which is where the Galvins live, and 18A. I would ask the committee to consider whether or not anything needs to be added as to whether or not the boundaries, if the property is divided, or the site is divided, whether anything needs to be put in about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can you turn your microphone off for a second? Members, any questions to Councillor Slimming? No. Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, I understand there is a condition on the application relating to boundary treatment, and members, can I draw your attention to the actual proposal that is in front of us? We are here this evening to decide whether the variation of condition 1 of permission for the extant planning permission to amend the plan to allow the installation of the windows. That is the specific matter that is before us this evening to debate and discuss. So can I ask you, do you have any questions to officers? Councillor Hussey.
So the existing bungalow, number 16, and then the front of the new property that's been built, 16A, there's a 30 metres distance. Yeah, 30, yeah. And then the distance between the front of the new dwelling and the rear of the properties at that face onto Silchester Road to the properties to the north is about 70 metres.
Okay. Any other questions, please? Councillor Frost and then Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Can officers please just confirm the position of the landing? From reading the plans, and I may have become confused, okay, it seems that the landing seems to be in the middle of the house, okay, and these big windows are effectively forming a light well, okay, into the hallway. Would I be correct in that?
Yes, that's correct. So the first floor plan that you can see where you've got the central bit, where you've got the stairs. Oh, there we go. The magic of technology. Yeah, so and then so if you zoom, yeah, go to the bottom to the south. So that's the new windows, yeah, to there. So that's what's shown on the front elevation and within the apex of the main, with the door underneath, so the apex of the roof. So that's that element there. So that's all landing, yes. And then you've got the two smaller windows either side of that central projection of the landing within bedroom 4 and bedroom 2.
Okay, Councillor Tomlin.
Just for completeness, have we a coloured picture showing the blue or the red area of the application, please?
No other questions? Okay, debates. Councillor Howard-Son, and then Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. There's no accounting for taste, because the only reason I could see to refuse this is it's really ugly. But you can't see it from the road, and that's not a valid reason anyway. So I would happily move it for approval, but I'm happy to let some people speak first.
Okay, so you've got a motion on the table for approval. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Freeman. And any other speakers? I've got Councillor Faulkner at the moment, followed by Councillor Frost and then Freeman. Councillor Faulkner next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, bearing in mind what you've said, our remit is fairly straightforward and simplistic. I was on the site viewing, and I did think that the amendments made good sense. I think any overlooking is fairly minimal because it's mostly the landing and the two side windows downstairs. So, yeah, I would agree that this is okay.
Thank you. Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Freeman.
Thank you very much. I agree completely with Councillor Faulkner. Okay. My only comment really, in addition to that, is, my golly, aren't they big? Okay, big windows. Thank you.
Councillor Freeman.
Just to echo pretty much what everyone else has said, considering that the only issue we're looking at is the windows, I don't see a problem with approving the amendments. Happy to second the motion.
Thank you very much. We have a motion moved and seconded for approval as per the officer's recommendations. Do I have hands in the air, please, for approval? That's everybody. That is passed. And Nicola, would you like to clarify the application?
The application is approved.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, we have one last item on the agenda aside from that which we've just dealt with, which is item 6. The authorisation to enter into a Section 106.
Report is effectively to seek authorisation to enter into a Section 106 agreement. Members will recall the refusal of the planning application for Oakdown Farm, as is always the case when there's a member overturn, when there's...
I'm sorry, I'm hearing a lot from the public gallery here, and I'm not able to hear what you're saying, Mike. You can please project yourself. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Could I politely ask the public gallery to be quiet, please, while we just finish this piece off? Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, Councillor. So, in essence, the report is to seek authorisation to enter into a Section 106 agreement in relation to the Oakdown Farm appeal. Members will recall refusing planning permission for the Oakdown Farm development mainly in relation to landscape impact. But as is always the case when there's a overturn of an officer recommendation where the Section 106 has not been completed, if you like, relatively standard reason for refusal would put on to say, and in the absence of a Section 106 agreement, there will be an additional reason for refusal. The purpose of that is to ensure that if you get to the appeal stage, the requirements that you would have required will still be secured by a Section 106 agreement. In normal circumstances, that is then taken forward through a unilateral undertaking, so where effectively the appellant brings forward their own legal agreement. In this particular instance, because the Section 106 agreement was very advanced at the time of the application, the decision has been taken to take forward the Section 106 agreement as opposed to unilateral undertaking, and it's simply the fact that we do not have authorisation through the scheme of delegation to do that, so we would need your authorisation to enter into the Section 106 agreement as a technical point.
Questions? Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, so just recapping, Mike, then if we don't go into an agreement which we've virtually completed, we could see something completely different that may be less beneficial?
That could be the case, although I think in this instance there's never been any really draw away from what has been required. So what was set out in the, if you recall, the resolution, the recommendation, sorry, for approval, we normally have a list of Section 106 requirements. Ultimately, that is what has been taken forward in the Section 106 for the appeal. So there's no real difference. It's simply the method, if you like. In some instances, at appeal, a developer may submit a unilateral undertaking to deviate, if you like, away from what was originally being sought at the application stage, because obviously it's at the appeal and the authority is then the planning inspector making that decision. But I think in this instance, it's fair to say it is actually reflecting what was sought to be secured at the application stage.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Right. So reading in there, that would include. It says requires parties, including Hampshire County Council, highway authorities, etc., to buy into this. Now, Hampshire County Council have issued a report that talks about junctions 7 and 8 and all of the A30 and all sort of roads that they're planning to look at, because in the state there's a capacity issue already now, and this is also linking in, I understand, with our potential local plan, our draft local plan, that side of Basingstoke receiving a lot of development. Now, how would that fit when we are seeing that the county have done cabinet decisions to move, if you like, a change that we were not aware of at the planning condition, that if we went for a 106 that did highway works that in fact were subsequently either not required or removed and improved and changed completely?
Thank you, Councillor. I think the key issue here is that at the appeal in relation to Oakdown Farm as a development, as opposed to the wider issues around Junction 7, Hampshire County Council's position is they still maintain no objection to that proposal. So they have entered into a statement of common ground effectively at the appeal stage, which is normal practice, to confirm what they said at the application stage, which is that they have no objection subject to certain mitigation being secured through the Section 106 agreement, and being party to that Section 106 agreement, they would effectively secure what they consider is necessary to secure that mitigation. Because obviously the impact on highways wasn't a reason for refusal.
Anybody else? Can I just explore that just a little bit? So if the situation is that at the time of the application, Hampshire County Council would have proposed X, Y and Z works, and that was that which we would have considered at the time, now we're going to face a situation where via the proposals coming forward that is different. Does that have any material element to the reasons and effect of the Section 106? If effectively we would be agreeing now works we would not have considered at all, as Chris rightly says, at the time of the application when we considered it. And in fact, by agreeing to this 106, we might well be enabling County Council to do works that we may well disagree with.
I think it's probably a theoretical as opposed to a practical point in this instance, because I think the key issue is that the proposals taken forward at the application stage are still effectively the same. Yeah. It is theoretically possible for obviously to shift between the two. I guess the key issue is that if authorisation wasn't given to do this through the 106, then the simple position would be that a unilateral undertaking would be submitted to achieve the same thing. Yeah. So effectively the authorisation, if the committee did give that this evening, won't really impact on what the content of the 106 is. It's more about whether we have the authorisation to enter into it as the method for securing what the mitigation is proposed.
Andy, do you want to? 109, recommendation 2, 2.1, application reference number there.
I'm still trying to get my... So, sorry, are you saying that... am I reading that correctly?
And the first reason for refusal come the second reason for refusal, which was effectively that one wasn't secured in the event that the appeal was allowed. It's absolutely normal practice for all appeals, and in the same way that we would recommend a decision being made to allow an appeal.
Councillor Frost, do you?
Thank you, Chair, for a loss here on the appeal. Okay. However,
Councillor Frost, I think we just be careful here, particularly on the record. Mike, do you want to come back?
So just to be absolutely clear, we're defending the appeal with exactly the same robustness as everything else. On every single appeal we deal with, where there is a Section 106 agreement issue, we would go through the process of putting forward evidence to explain why the requirements of the Section 106 are still valid. This is simply about the vehicle to ensure that happens. So it doesn't, if a Section 106 is entered into, it does not diminish at all the arguments, if you like, for or against the development on the principal issue.
Okay, Councillor Frost, and I'll move around the room.
Sorry, thank you. Okay, thank you for that reassurance, because I was wobbling then. Okay, I would like to obviously hear what other, councillors actually want, but I am minded to put in a motion if no one else has the ability to do so.
Hold that thought, Stuart. Councillor Faulkner, followed by Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Yeah, I attended my first appeal hearing yesterday. It was an exciting way to spend a day. And this subject came up exactly as Mike has described. It was seen as part of the procedure that needed to be considered in the overall process of the hearing. So when the inspector questioned both parties as to what had been going on with the S106, it didn't in any way imply that it would affect the decision she was going to make, but to make sure things were in place properly.
Thank you, Councillor Howard Sorrell, followed by Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you. So, just for my own sanity, did we forget to do something when we refused it, and that's why we're here doing this tonight, or is this a completely separate matter? And we couldn't have avoided having to hear this by prior action?
Anne's going to come.
I don't think we forgot. We could have actually had a slightly different recommendation, but the truth was the 106 agreement was so advanced at that stage that the applicant just wanted to proceed with an agreement rather than changing the whole document into a unilateral undertaking, which would have, been a lot more drafting, etc.
Is that okay? Okay, Councillor Tomlin and then Councillor Frost finally.
Thank you again, Chair. Okay, so we're that far ahead with a 106 agreement. Can we as members see this? Because we were aware there was no 106 agreement, that's the reason it was one of the refusals. Now we've been asked to go forward for one, but I personally would like to know what's in it in terms of what might help mitigate the application.
So, Councillor, I think the key issue here is that there's a timing issue. The appeal, the inquiry starts on the 18th of October, so the authorisation to enter into that is required this evening, or I guess the only alternative would be at this late stage they would have to change it to a unilateral undertaking. There's absolutely no issue in us sharing that 106. It will be a public document in terms of what's being progressed. So more than happy post meeting to take it offline and provide that copy to the committee members. If that be of assistance, but it will be part of the appeal submissions that will go in ahead of the 18th of October, which is when the 7-day inquiry commences.
Councillor Rattigan, you've not spoken. I'll bring you in, if you don't mind, Councillor Frost first.
Oh, sorry. Chair, we've got another meeting on the 12th of October, have we not? Could it not be sent to us before then and us see it and approve on that day, or do you need a lead-in time for the appeal?
I'm thinking no. I think if we didn't approve this tonight, then they would just make it unilateral. But what we could do before the appeal is just give you a summary of what's in it, because you're probably not interested in reading the whole agreement, but you want to know what the exact obligations are, and we could probably arrange for you to have that.
Okay, Stuart, finally, and then we'll draw this.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, I would like to move, okay, that we accept the recommendation, okay, to approve the authorising of entering into a Section 106 agreement in relation to the appeal to Oakdown Farm, okay, in Dummer. But we would like to see, okay, a copy of, or even an executive summary of the Section 106 agreement, okay, before it actually goes through. I would also just like to put on record that I still object, okay, to Oakdown Farm development, okay, but I'm happy to move the motion.
Do I have a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Faulkner. And just to be clear, I think from the debate this evening, I think we'd like to see the whole Section 106 agreement shared with members. And does that satisfy you? Happy with that as the mover? Seconder. Graham, you happy with that? To see the whole Section 106 agreement? Yeah, thank you. So, okay, Section 2.1 has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please, of the recommendation? Those against and abstentions? 1. That's carried, and we shall wait to see the Section 106 shared. Thank you, members. That completes the agenda this evening.